In the hush of September 1945, on the sun-baked docks of Guam, the air hung heavy with the salt of the Pacific and the faint, acrid tang of diesel from idling transport ships. A group of 24 Japanese women, their uniforms tattered and faces gaunt from months of evasion in the jungles after the fall of Saipan, stepped hesitantly onto American soil under guard. The tropical breeze carried distant echoes of waves crashing against coral reefs, mingling with the low hum of military vehicles and the occasional bark of orders in a foreign tongue. These women nurses, clerical aides, and civilian auxiliaries clutched their few belongings, their eyes downcast, braced for the retribution they had been taught to expect from the victorious enemy. This moment, etched in the closing days of the Pacific War, marked not just the end of a brutal campaign, but a profound rupture in the worldview these women had carried through years of conflict. The Battle of Saipan in June 1944 had been a turning point, where American forces overwhelmed Japanese defenses, capturing over 1,000 prisoners, including civilians and support personnel who had been embedded with the Imperial Army. Among them were women like these, who had served in auxiliary roles, tending wounds or managing supplies under the rigid hierarchies of the Japanese military. Propaganda had painted the Americans as barbaric demons, capable of unspeakable atrocities. Stories of mutilation and enslavement whispered in training camps back home. Yet here, in the shadow of defeat, they found themselves not executed on the spot as their commanders had warned, but processed as prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention, a document Japan had signed but rarely honored toward its captives. Historical records from U.S. Army interrogation reports detail how these women, often weighing under 90 pounds upon capture due to starvation rations, expected immediate death or worse. Instead, they were fed, medically examined, and transported to camps where survival, not suffering, became the norm. As they boarded trucks bound for holding facilities, the women whispered among themselves, recalling the imperial edicts that surrender was worse than death, a betrayal of the emperor's divine will. They had seen comrades choose suicide over capture, leaping from cliffs or detonating grenades in final acts of defiance. One nurse, later documented in a post-war memoir, recalled the dread, "We thought America would kill us. Instead, they gave us soap." This simple act hygiene supplies issued without fanfare clashed with the narratives of savagery drilled into them. In Japanese POW camps for Allied prisoners, by contrast, mortality rates soared to nearly one-third, with accounts of bayonet practice on captives and forced labor leading to thousands of deaths, as detailed in U.S. military archives from liberated sites like Bataan. These women, products of a society where stoicism and silence were virtues, anticipated chains and silence. What they encountered was abundance and an unfamiliar permissiveness that began to erode their certainties. Transported across the ocean to camps like Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, where winter winds howled like distant artillery, the women arrived in a land of stark contrasts. The barracks, though Spartan, offered beds with blankets, and meals arrived thrice daily rice, though not the sticky variety they knew, supplemented with bread, vegetables, and even meat. Records from the U.S. War Department indicate that Japanese female POWs, numbering in the hundreds by war's end, gained an average of 50 to 60 pounds during their internment, their bodies rebounding from the skeletal frames forged in Pacific hideouts. They expected starvation as punishment. Instead, they faced portions that overflowed trays, a testament to American logistical might. One clerk, in a diary entry preserved in repatriation files, noted the bewilderment. "The enemy feeds us more in a day than we saw in a week on the islands." This abundance was no accident. It stemmed from adherence to international protocols where POWs were to be treated with humanity, a principle that stood in opposition to the Bushido Code's disdain for the captured. Yet it was not just the food that unsettled them. The sound of laughter, that recurring echo of unrestrained joy, pierced their guarded silence like an unfamiliar melody. In their homeland, under wartime austerity, laughter was muted, a luxury subordinated to duty and endurance. Military discipline forbade frivolity, especially among women in service roles, where composure signified loyalty to the empire. They had been taught that Americans were joyless brutes. Yet here, in the camps, guards chuckled over card games, and children from nearby towns, drawn by curiosity, giggled at the fences, their voices carrying on the crisp air. The women, huddled in groups, at first ignored these sounds, their faces impassive masks forged in the fires of propaganda. They expected reprimands for any display of emotion. What they experienced was tolerance, even encouragement, as American personnel allowed moments of levity amid the routine. The emotional chasm widened with each passing day. Conditioned to anticipate torture-vivid tales from Tokyo radio broadcasts of Allied prisoners beheaded or starved, these women found medical care instead. Nurses like Keiko Tanaka, a fictional composite drawn from multiple accounts, arrive coughing from exposure, only to be treated with antibiotics and rest, regaining strength they thought lost forever. They whispered of the demons who now offered tea, that bitter brew they initially mocked in quiet rituals of defiance. Holding sachets between fingers, dipping them with exaggerated disdain, they would inhale and grimace, sparking soft chuckles among themselves, a small rebellion against captivity. "You can cage our bodies, but you cannot touch our spirit," one murmured, as documented in guard logs from Fort McCoy. Yet this laughter, tentative at first, grew unchecked, without punishment from the guards who sometimes smiled in response. They couldn't believe it. In Japan, such outbursts might invite a slap or worse. Here, the sound of laughter symbolized a baffling freedom, a democratic ethos where even prisoners retained some spark of humanity. Historical evidence abounds in interrogation reports and diaries, painting a picture of profound disbelief. In one U.S. Army report from 1944 captured Korean auxiliaries serving with Japanese forces, often conflated in records described similar shocks, noting the near luxury of camp life compared to Burmese outposts, though tempered by cultural judgments. For the Japanese women, the contrast was starker. They expected execution at dawn. Instead, breakfast was served eggs, toast, and coffee, items exotic and plentiful. A group of 24 women, as recounted in oral histories, knelt in prayer one muddy morning, awaiting their fate, only to be handed trays by guards who nodded politely. "We expected brutality. Instead, we received clean uniforms, hot meals, and gentle voices," one later reflected in a repatriation interview. This kindness extended to personal care. When offered new clothes, some refused until their hair, matted with grime, was washed, viewing themselves as unclean and unworthy, a poignant echo of their internalized shame. As weeks turned to months, the sound of laughter became a bridge across the divide. Children at the fences tossed balls and flowers, their peals of mirth drawing hesitant responses from the women. At first they stared, whispering criticisms. American children are foolish, undisciplined. But envy crept in. Memories of their own youths stifled by war drills. One young girl called out, "Mother," to a nurse, repeating it with innocent insistence, freezing the women in a mix of embarrassment and longing. Many had left families behind, children starving amid bombed cities. This word restored a fragment of identity, and soon, soft laughter rippled through the group, not mockery, but a release, startling in its freedom. Guards, moved by the scene, allowed gifts, apples, gum, crayon drawings with notes like, "We love you." The sound of laughter, once a sign of weakness in their ideology, now echoed as a symbol of American abundance, not of material wealth alone, but of emotional liberty, where democracy permitted even the defeated to express joy without fear. This transformation was gradual, yet irrevocable. Ideologically, these women had been steeped in the emperor's cult, where individual expression yielded to collective sacrifice. Surrender was taboo, survival in enemy hands, a stain. Yet in the camps, witnessing guards share cigarettes and chuckle freely, they questioned the propaganda. One lieutenant's diary entry captures it. "They thank us for everything, even food." The rigid hierarchies dissolved. Some women, like those at Fort McCoy, found solace in the mocked tea during a brutal storm, passing cups hand to hand for warmth, the act fostering solidarity that transcended enmity. A guard, haunted by Saipan memories, forged records to aid repatriation, risking court-martial for a quiet rebellion of mercy. Through such gestures, perceptions shifted. Americans were no longer monsters, but humans capable of compassion, prompting reflections on their own society's cruelties toward Allied POWs, where torture and starvation were routine, as evidenced by survivor testimonies from Bataan and beyond. By spring 1946, as repatriation ships departed, many women carried not just regained weight but altered ideologies. The sound of laughter lingered in their minds, a recurring emblem of the freedom they had glimpsed, a democracy where abundance included the right to joy, even in chains. One survivor's message, scrawled on rice paper: "War teaches us to hate. Tea reminds us to feel." This evolution underscored a deeper truth. In the ruins of empire, humanity persisted, reshaping souls scarred by conflict. In the quiet aftermath, as these women returned to a devastated Japan, the echoes of that laughter resonated like a distant bell, linking their fleeting captivity to eternal verities. Freedom, it revealed, was not merely the absence of bonds, but the permission to embrace life's fullness, abundance in spirit, where ideology yields to empathy, and the simple act of laughing affirms the indomitable core of the human soul. In that sound, democracy whispered its promise that even amid war's shadows, light breaks through. illuminating paths to reconciliation and the shared abundance of our common humanity.